Looking to make some healthier habits this holiday season? Make sure to check out our Moving Through Midlife community over on Facebook, as we are doing a Planksgiving event where we are doing daily plank workouts. We will be doing an advent for healthy, happy hips this holiday season, and then also have a sugar challenge, a 2-week sugar challenge that you might be interested in. Happy holidays!
Welcome to Raising Healthy Humans, a podcast created for busy moms, where you can easily find info on health and wellness for your family. Join Courtney, a health coach, movement and posture specialist, and founder of FormFit, an active and supportive community where she helps busy moms move more. Here on Raising Healthy Humans podcast, she shares personal life experiences, training, knowledge, and conversations with other health and wellness experts so you can raise healthy humans.
Today, I am speaking with Brenda, an occupational therapist who wants to help families with mealtime strategies as she understands the power struggles that can occur at mealtime with little ones. Her goal is to not only help your child with the actual eating of the food with therapy, but also with the whole experience around the meal and mealtime. I really hope you enjoy our conversation. I think she brings a lot of value to helping us look at mealtime a little bit differently. Hi, Brenda. How are you?
Hi, Courtney. I am great. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. I want you to speak with me about what you do. So you are an occupational therapist.
Yes.
And you live here in Naples. And
Yes.
you are offering families, you found that you wanted to really dive into, so occupational therapy, there's many different avenues you can go, but you ended up working with families on helping them with mealtime strategies and helping children to work on eating, right? Can you tell me a little bit more about like what brought you into that specific avenue?
Sure. I have been an occupational therapist for 30 years. I have always worked with kids. When I first started out, I worked in the school system in another state. I was in Kansas and I was in South Dakota. But I've always worked with early intervention while I was working with school-age children as well. And early intervention is my love. It's why I came to Florida also, was to take a job in early intervention. And the kids that I was working with really had so many feeding struggles, and that was a pain point for so many of the families, was really having difficulty struggling with meal times, not knowing what to feed their children, not knowing how to feed their children. And so I started doing more continuing ed for feeding therapy, and just grew to love it, and grew to just loved working with families, loved working with the kids, and just seeing how it helps bring a lot of my background together. I know you talk a lot about breathing and the core and polyvagal theory. And, when you look at all of those things combined, you look at sensory integration, everything is needed for eating. Eating is one of our hardest things that our body has to do. And so it's a fascinating thing for me. And it's, something that parents need to that are struggling with multiple times a day with their kids. And so just to be able to help parents figure out what will work for their child is something that I really feel called to do.
Okay. So interesting you said what you said, because when I think, my children are older now, but when I think about them being toddlers and, I mean, I know you even work with newborns, but really when you start to see toddlers, you start to see them getting picky and starting to show preferences towards foods. And I don't think I ever thought, well, I need to go see an occupational therapist about this. So can you tell me where would someone want to begin? Like, are there certain things that they're looking for, or do you really, I mean, you help people not just on the occupational therapy side of the mealtime strategies as well, right?
Right, right.
Okay.
Yes. So there is in toddlerhood, there is a natural developmental progression that all kids tend to go through where it's called neophobia, where it's the fear of something new, which
Okay.
includes food. And so all toddlers tend to go through a developmental stage where they want the same thing the same way served to them all the time. And, it's tricky getting through that stage. It's about 18 months old is
Okay.
when kids will go through that. And really, if kids get stuck in that, is where a lot of the issue happens then because parents get to the point where they're like, oh, but I have to feed them this in this certain way. Say it's, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And if I cut it wrong, oh no, the world is ending. We need to do this right and don't breathe. We have to use the yellow plate, all of those things. Parents find all the tricks that make it work for their child. And in the meantime, what is happening there is their child is becoming even more rigid, even
Mm.
more inflexible, and doubling down on if this doesn't happen, then the world is not aligned properly and I'm not going to eat. And that's where, parents are in their best intentions are doing what they can figure out what to do. However, those are the things that we want to try and mix things up. It's okay if we don't have the yellow plate today. Look, we have this. This is cool. Just trying to help kids become more flexible, become more adventurous in their eating is what can set them up for success. The thing that I know parents have really struggled with that I hear all the time is going to that 18-month pediatrician visit
Okay.
and voicing their concerns and hearing wait and see.
Mhm.
And I am here to, tell those mamas, trust your gut. If there is an issue with your child and you have good intuition and it does not hurt to reach out and find some education and find what will work. And that's one of my main goals at this point in my career is to help parents find those answers before it becomes a real problem for their children. The
Okay.
earlier the better, the more that we can build in that flexibility, the better off they'll be.
Okay. So if our child, because I mean, this is like you said, once you hit 18 months, this is kind of what they do. So do you usually recommend not falling into that scenario of feeding them the same things, trying to change it up constantly? Or do you try to, one thing that I usually recommend, and this is what I did, this is how we got through dinner time, instead of me being a short order cook for everyone, I ended up doing like this was what was for dinner, everything on the plate. And then I always put something I knew that they would love. So that could have been a side that each one of them liked something different. Like you got yogurt, you got strawberries, you got goldfish, but it was like, is that what you usually recommend to still provide them options or still provide them? I know I'm saying kind of the same, but
Yeah,
you know what I'm
yeah,
asking? Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, for toddlers, for preschoolers, actually any age child that is struggling with some feeding things, would you want to go to the table if there's absolutely, if there's things there that you've never seen before, if there's things that have tried before and they look really gross to you and whatever, if there is something there that you trust and that will fill your belly and help you feel better, and that is absolutely what we want to start with. Definitely have a safe food is what we call it. And then definitely, family meal time, serving meals, just getting the exposure of passing something, so you're seeing it, so you're smelling it, so that you might have to be touching it, interacting with the food. That all helps to decrease the fear that surrounds a new food. And there's so many steps that come to. There's actually the SOS approach to feeding. I've taken their courses. It's sequential oral sensory is what SOS stands for, and they have come out with 32 steps for
Oh, wow.
feeding. At the very top of the staircase is eating, chewing and swallowing. At the very bottom of it is tolerating being in the room. So you can go from tolerating being in the room with that food up to seeing it, touching it, smelling it, bringing it to your body, like to your lips, um, tasting it, getting it inside your mouth. We teach kids how to, if you're not feeling safe with this food, if you're not quite ready for it, it's okay to take it out of your mouth and put it on the napkin. That's an important skill. And once kids feel safe with that, they will do more, knowing that they are in a trusting relationship with you. They are connected to you. They know that, you know what, if I'm not quite ready for this, it's okay. She told me it's okay to put it on my napkin. So we get further along in therapy if we, can teach some of those skills and show what you can do with food, and not make and take some of the fear away from it.
Okay. So would you say, my guess is that you're not recommending parents, like, if there's a green bean on the plate and the child doesn't like the green bean, it's you eat the green bean or else.
I am not a fan of that, because then it becomes a power struggle.
Okay.
And the hardest thing, I mean, parents are already feeling drained
Mhm.
by, their worries around the feeding process. They are getting into power struggles. And when we're in a power struggle with a child, guess who wins? The child usually wins, unless it becomes a huge ordeal. And my mission is that we will take away those power struggles from meals, that we will reconnect, we will build that trust in the feeding process, that we can use fun food exploration activities, just follow some easy educational tips, and then we can have the kids and the parents feel safe, seen, heard in this feeding process. And we want to transform those mealtime power struggles to be in harmony, be hold those families together with acceptance, and come from a place of, yes, when you're ready, you can do these things. And that's not to say that we don't interact with that green bean on the plate.
Okay.
We can, like, if it, and it's like one of those steps. If you're okay with the green bean being on the plate, great. You know what? And if you're not, maybe, here, I take one more green bean. Can you hand it to me? Then you moved up the steps of that ladder,
Okay.
and the kid is like, yes, I'll get rid of this off my plate. But they interacted with it. and they were successful with that interaction. And possibly towards, like, oh, okay, so you know what? That wasn't that bad. I touched it. The world didn't end, Oh, maybe we should have passed the bowl of green beans around, and maybe this time we can cut the green beans and see what's inside. Different things for exploration.
Okay. Okay. Well, and that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting. I know you mentioned this as well, that one way to get your children more interested in foods is to have them help at dinner time with making the foods. And I find it very interesting how my children are. And it seems like my daughter, she loves green beans. And I remember her snapping green beans at mealtime. Like that's what we did. My son, my middle son, he loves asparagus. And he used to be the one that would always come snap the asparagus. Now, I don't know if that like really is what kind of brought it all together for them, but I just find it interesting how they both specifically always wanted to help do that job. And that tends to be their favorite of the vegetables that they eat.
Yes, and that's such a great example. One thing that we love to do when we're, like I love to see what kids are interested in and build from their interests. And helping in the kitchen is a great thing. And, once kids are around the age of 5 or 6, they love to do science experiments. And so we will do science experiments with food so that, it's like, let's see what happens if we can, what do you think would happen if we change this food? What do you think, will it be the same taste? Will it be the same texture? Will it smell the same? All of those kinds of things that we can still do exploration. And the more exploration you do, the more neurons are firing in your brain. And the more that your sensory system is getting to be okay with the food, and your cortisol levels are going to decrease, and you are going to be more open. And I see it all the time with the more open, the more playful that we can be in therapy sessions, the more that kids are willing to, it shocks them sometimes even that they're like, oh, I didn't even know that I was going to put that in my mouth. And I did. And you know what? It's, and then like some of the kids around, early elementary school age, you can kind of give a rating scale, how, okay, so that just went in your mouth. Let's talk about the flavor of it. What did it taste like? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the absolute best thing you ever ate, 1 being the worst thing you ever ate. What number would you give that? And it is shocking to me sometimes that kids rarely give it below a 5. So that is, it's a great way to just kind of show, okay, so if that was a hard thing for you to do, it went into your mouth and maybe you weren't expecting that to be that texture. Maybe it was a little bit more squirmy than you thought it was going to be. We use all sorts of different adjectives around things. Okay, so how do you think that we could change that next time so that, oh, maybe it will be a little bit easier for it to be in your mouth maybe it was too wet. What if we took a paper towel and we dried it off a little bit? Do you think that would help? Do you think maybe if we sprinkled some cinnamon on it, that would change? Whatever it is, that there's different ways that we can change the sensory aspects of it to help with the actual functional feeding aspects of the food.
Okay. Well, and you mentioned texture, and I know this is something that a lot of families deal with, myself included, when my oldest was younger. There was a I mean, he's still like that today, but there's something about this, the mushy. Like, is there something behind that? Is there a reason children do or don't like certain textures? And um, how can we help them get used to a specific texture?
Sure. When you look at the developmental continuum of what textures kids are able to handle, um, mixed textures is the hardest texture. So if you think of like a soup where you have broth and then, maybe a piece of meat that's a harder texture to chew, and then some mushy vegetables, and it's all in one bite,
Uh-huh.
that is a really, really challenging bite for motor skills, your oral
Okay.
motor chewing, and sensory things, because there's a lot to process there. Okay.
Okay.
And, the broth might be maybe a degree or two hotter than the meat is, or, like there's so many things that come along with that kind of a mixed texture thing. So if, and mushy things that maybe still need to be chewed, but really mush up really easily in the mouth, that's typically something that is more sensory. Like think about maybe biting into a cherry tomato or a grape, and that, when it's firm on the outside, and then when you bite into it, it's squishy and it squirts in your mouth, and that is a big sensory um reaction there that you have to be ready, prepared for in your mouth. Now, if you've done it 100 times, not a big deal. If it's your first time, maybe you want to be prepared for that so that you can just know exactly what to expect there. When we look at babies, first they have liquid. They typically, in the past, we've always gone to puree next.
Mhm.
Now with baby-led weaning, there are things where we actually like to help babies do, like we may give them a something that they can't bite off of, hold on to this big carrot stick that's
Okay.
like a huge one. We're not talking about a baby carrot. We're talking about a big carrot stick. And hold on to this, and with supervision there, because you don't want to just walk away from them with this. But we want to look at, are they able to chew on this, put it on the side of their mouth, on their molars, or where their molars will be, and move it back. And moving that back in their mouth helps them develop where their gag reflex needs to be. If their gag reflex is too far forward in their mouth, we have issues with getting the gag reflex moved back then, and we need to do more of chewing on the sides, chewing on both sides. Sometimes we do something that's called a tongue walk to get used to things going back on our tongue and not producing a gag reflex. But the more that we can help babies know, oh, if this gets back in my mouth too far, what do I need to do? I need to pull that out of my mouth. Then they have control over it. And they're developing more oral motor skills as they go.
Okay. So talking into the gag reflex, because I find this interesting, there is a way to train yourself away from that gag reflex.
Now, we all need a gag reflex. We don't want
Right,
to get
right,
rid
right,
of a
right.
gag reflex.
Meaning,
Yes.
meaning children, again, I have one specifically.
Mhm.
You cannot go in his mouth. Like he's always gagging at the dentist. It's very difficult. They have to give him gas every time. But
Yes.
is there a way to train him to get more comfortable with things further back in his mouth?
Yes, yes. So with an older child, what I would suggest is I would give him like probably, you could even use like a tongue depressor, a popsicle stick. and start on the very tip of his mouth. He can do it himself. He can look in the mirror and push straight down on the middle of his tongue with firm pressure. You don't want it to be too light because that could be really alerting. A deep pressure will be more calming and organizing. So you can push and then push, just take little walking steps back with that. And when he's getting to the point where he's like, oh, I'm almost where I'm ready to gag, take that out. Take a deep breath, start over. And eventually, like by practicing that, say once a day, for a few times, reps there, you will start to be able to push that gag reflex back in the mouth. And what we really want to see is that the gag reflex does not start for at least halfway back on your tongue.
Okay. Interesting.
Then at least you'll be able to go to the dentist successfully with that.
Well, and is this like I had spoken to someone, I think it was the speech therapist, and she was talking about how our jaws should be worked, like when we eat. And she commented about, and I found this fascinating, maybe you can speak into this a little bit, how when you chew, like especially meat, we should be moving between both sides. Who does that? Because you want to make sure the muscles on both sides of your jaw are working effectively. And I'm like, oh my God, I only chew on one side.
I think most of us do have a favorite side. And, you definitely know that if you've had dental work and you're sore, or you've had kids have braces and they're more sore on one side than the other. But like when I'm working with kids, we all have one side of our body that is, more developed. That's why we have a hand dominance. That's why we have a foot dominance. And, and we all have one side of our body that we just tend to use more than the other. Right. And so in feeding therapy, if I see that a child is always tending towards one side or the other, then, we'll practice, okay, so this last time you used the veggie stick on the right side over here, this time let's take some bites on the other side, on the left side, can you do 3 crunches on the left? And we'll see if that, it's called tongue lateralization, where if you bite right in the middle of your mouth, being able to lateralize the food will take it over towards where your molars are on the side teeth for chewing.
Okay. And does your tongue and the strength, and this is probably getting into just me, does it have anything to do with the gag reflex? Like, would you say like a weaker tongue is?
It certainly can. It certainly can. They don't have to be related.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
There certainly could be some things. Okay. And there are some kids who it gets into sensory and motor skills, where some kids have a hard time with moving their tongue. And so when they have a hard time learning to use that tongue lateralization, so they don't use a rotary chewing pattern. What they do is just an up and down, a munching pattern, or they use their tongue to mush the food up against the roof of their mouth. And both of those, I mean, what you see in kids, if they're mushing the food up against the roof of their mouth, or they're just doing an up and down pattern, they're messy. And they get food stuck in their mouth, on the roof of their mouth. They might gag a lot more if they get food stuck up there and they can't handle it. So that's when we really need to get in there and do a lot more of the chewing exercises and make sure that their tongue can move the food to the side.
Okay. So interesting. All right. So you have mentioned, I was looking at your website, and you spoke about how OTs tend to focus on the doing, but you really want to focus on the being. Can you explain that?
Yes, actually. So this is actually a great segue into this because we have actually been talking the sensory, the motor, the chewing, the swallowing, the gag reflex, all of those things are the doing part of
Okay.
that, which is so important. It's vital for being successful with um, eating. What I am looking at is even before those steps. Yes, those are all important. Yes, we need the knowledge and we need to know how to fix these things. The being, though, is the part that a lot of people will just skim over and not paying enough attention to. And the being is developing a relationship and being connected with the caregiver that you're working with and developing trust in that feeding relationship. We're looking for felt safety, and if we think, I know you've talked about the polyvagal theory before, which I love. The vagus nerve is responsible for so much in our body, for our sensory awareness, for our social being. The polyvagal nerve, there's the rest and digest part of
Okay.
it. And
Mhm.
then there's also the fight and flight part of it. And when we have the fight and flight part turned on, we have zero hunger. Hunger is shut off if we are in fight or flight. So if we're focusing only on the doing part of, I want you to chew this, I want you to swallow this, and we have a child that's getting more and more anxious about the feeding process, we are not doing ourselves any favors with that anxiety coming into that equation there. We
Okay.
want to make sure that that child is really regulated, feeling calm, feeling safe, feeling like, oh, this is kind of fun, feeling connected and, having a good relationship with the food and with the caregiver at that point so that we can keep those hunger cues turned on because that's so important for the rest and digest part of the polyvagal equation there. So
Okay. So would you recommend that when parents sit down, like to take a moment? And this was something I had thought about how naturally there's certain things that are done in everyday life, more so probably years ago than today, and how maybe it wasn't planned, but how it kind of created certain situations. And what I'm thinking of specifically is, but no matter your religion or your beliefs or anything like that, years ago, people would sit down and have a prayer before they ate. And it's almost like this. I was like, oh, that's so interesting, like this calming. And now we sit down and we're rushing and we're, like, so would you recommend, and it doesn't have to be prayer, it can be whatever you choose, but that calming when you sit down to sit and just be calm for a couple of minutes before you start eating?
absolutely. Well, and part of that too is that it is a cognitive signal to your brain that, oh, I need to get in the zone for this, and you're absolutely right. Like we're rushing, we're on the go, we either sit down and eat, or so many eat in the car,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
there's so much that happens, or there's a device on, there's the TV,
mhm.
or a phone screen, or YouTube is on, so many things, so that you know people are zoning out and not paying attention to their body signals. And yes, doing something like that, and prayer is definitely a big part of, like, let's stop, let's reflect on this, let's get our bodies ready for this nourishment. And in therapy too, we will talk about having a cognitive reset. We may, before we dive into the feeding situation, we may do, like, I am always looking at what sensory system is being delivered to me here in this in this situation? Is this child, really out of sorts because, oh no, they were running late, and this happened and this happened and this happened, and mom was stressed, and so the child picked up on that stress. We need to reset that, because if we're feeling stress, it's not going to go well with that. We may need to, do something that is a different kind of a sensory activity before we ever even get the food out. And so we also, I recommend that we will do maybe some kind of a sensory warm up before meals and snacks. And even sometimes just having a routine of, we put our toys away so we don't have those distractions there. And then we go wash our hands, because that's a good hygiene thing. And it resets us, and it gives our brain the signal that it's almost time to eat.
Okay, perfect. And then when I think about like everything you're talking about with sensory, for those people who are maybe, I always think of it like HSPs, highly sensitive people, but sometimes the reason is the unawareness of it, right? So like you had mentioned, if you're putting soup in your mouth and you've got all these different textures, because it's a new sensation, that might be more of the issue. But maybe just sitting down, taking a minute to look at what's on your plate, smell what's on your plate, all of that can kind of create that more calming, knowing that, this is what we're doing now, and being more comfortable with the sensory experience. I don't know.
Yes, absolutely. And that also brings up a good point too, that I really love what's called the division of responsibility, and that was developed by Ellen Satter. She's a speech therapist who works in feeding also, and really, the parent in this division of responsibility, the parent decides what to serve, decides when to serve it, decides where to serve it. And so those are the parents' responsibilities: what, when, where. The child then is responsible for how much and even if they eat at that point. So it really respects the child's autonomy there, and and it respects hunger cues too. Not every child is hungry every 2 hours if there's something that's being offered to them at that point. So,
and one thing my doctor had said to me years ago when my kids were little is, don't expect your children to sit down for 3 meals a day. Allow them to have a meal kind of, he said, like on the go, not meaning us being on the go, but it's down on the countertop. And if they wanted to nibble, but I guess maybe, is that a toddler thing? Like where they're not that you want, I mean, okay. Then I start thinking, okay, choking hazards, like running around the house, choking hazard, all of that. But I felt like my children, one specifically, who did much better not sitting down for lunch. Yes, we sat down for breakfast and dinner, but he was go, 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 go. And he did not want to sit down for lunch. Like,
yeah,
he wouldn't eat.
yeah, sure. And that's, I mean, there are different points of view for those kinds of things, and there's always pros and cons to things. One thing that, like if children are getting to the point where they're hangry, which happens, and the meal is not ready, if you can give them something that is an option, that, maybe you have fresh veggies cut up and they're, like, this is your appetizer for before the meal, so that you've got an option there. And, we all eat standing up. We eat standing up while we're, preparing our meals in the kitchen and those kinds of things too. So, we want to make things as normal as possible and have them be in a routine that makes sense for your family.
Okay.
That's a big key, you know,
Right.
and just knowing your child. Moms know their kids best, you
Hmm.
know, and you know, you figured out what worked for your child there. So I think that's a very important thing. And I also think that, you know, we are used to um thinking about 3 square meals a day and
Hmm.
then snacks in between. And, you know, like I think that in this day and age, we need to give ourselves permission to kind of think outside the box sometimes. And, you know, especially for toddlers want to eat and they want to eat a lot. And if you're thinking, oh, this is a snack for a toddler, and so they need, you know, like here's your package of goldfish crackers. Not necessarily, you know, a snack for a toddler could be what you would feed them for a meal too,
Right.
you know.
Right.
You and really I look at things as being um for a snack or a meal, you want to include a protein, a fruit or vegetable, and a carbohydrate so that you've got some balance there. And that doesn't have to mean that you have to go all out and prepare a huge thing every 2 hours for your child. That's not reasonable. Nobody has time for that, you know. But a snack for a toddler could be, you know, you could have um, peanut butter for the protein. You could have apple slices for the fruit, and you could have a few cheese crackers, you know, so that you've got it rounded. And maybe they are still learning about apple slices. Maybe they're still learning about peanut butter, but maybe the cheese crackers are the go-to food. So you've hit
Okay.
those things, and you've got different textures
Hmm.
involved there. You've got, you know, different flavors, and you've got some nutritional aspects in there.
Okay. So let us know where we can find you and learn more from you,
All
because I'm sure
right.
lots of people would like to know how you can make mealtime easier for them.
Absolutely. So my website is That Makes Sense OT. It's a little bit hard because there are 2 S's in a row there. So that makes sense OT.com. And then I'm on Instagram at That Makes Sense OT. And yeah, I would love to connect with people. I do have a couple of free offerings that if you know want to sign up on the website that just can give some tips for helping along this feeding journey. And then I'm actually coming out with a new video offer for families that it's in pre-launch right now. Hopefully it will be in launch for this podcast. So actually it's called the Table Time video offer. And it's really for those who are tired of the power struggles and are feeling stuck in where do I go and what do I do for these meal times that are so super hard for us.
Mhm.
So this offer is going to be videotaping your biggest mealtime challenges. And then we will have a place where it's encrypted, it's safe to send those in to me so that I can help you along your feeding journey, so that it's tailored educational advice that you will get with that. I do want to say that this does not take the place of feeding therapy. There is always a place for feeding therapy, you know, but it's also, you know, it's for those who have been told by their pediatrician to wait and see, and they know that they have an issue that they want to have addressed and they don't know where to turn. It's also for those who might be on a waiting list, because that does happen. Feeding therapy
Mhm.
is a little bit hard to get to. And it could also be for those that are in feeding therapy right now and just need some more suggestions for what can I change at home to help my child. Um, so really this offer, we're looking to bring it out so that it's a disruptor in the market right now. Make it accessible that, parents want education. They want to help their children. And really we're looking at finding more accessible and affordable ways for parents to be able to help their kids with these feeding struggles. So for this offer, because I really appreciate you having me on your podcast, I am offering this at an introductory price for $49 for this. So that will be up on my website, and it's tailored to the specific needs and of the individual child and family. And I would love to help out with some educational tips with that. So
perfect. Thank you so much for that. Before we go, if you could provide just one piece of information that moms could take with them this week to work on with their children around mealtime and helping them raise healthier eaters, what would that be?
That is such a good question.
Put you on the spot.
It is so hard to come up with just one.
Okay, you can get like up to 3.
Sounds good. Okay, so I think one of the main thing is trust your child's hunger signals. Okay. I think that's a huge thing. Help your child feel calm and organized in that situation. Connect with them. Have fun with them. Get them involved in the kitchen. Get them involved in, wanting to explore foods. Food should be a fun and happy time and not a stressful time for anybody, parents or kids. So, and, food is food. We like to assign that this is good food and this is healthy food and that this is the treat and this is what you can have afterwards. If you have a child that is struggling with food and they really tend towards the sweet snacks or the salty snacks, incorporate that into their routine, expose them to everything else, and allow them to explore.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day for this.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here, Courtney.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Brenda. I feel like she provided us a lot of information to think about dinner time differently and how we can get our children involved with all of their senses at mealtime rather than just that textural type thing that many of us think about when we think about occupational therapy and mealtime. I do want to let you know that at the end she mentioned that she was able to provide our listeners information for the videos, and she did want me to specify for you that it's for the first 20 of you that reach out to her. So I think this is going to be so valuable for some of you, so I hope you take her up on that. All of this information will be in the show notes for you as well.